Amid the splendor of the vast Babylonian Empire, a young Hebrew named Daniel stood out among many. He had been taken captive from Jerusalem during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, along with other young Israelites of noble birth, handpicked for their looks, intelligence, and wisdom. But unlike so many who were lost amidst the luxury and pagan culture of Babylon, Daniel remained steadfast, and this faithfulness soon made him shine. Daniel and his three friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, were placed in the palace to serve. Despite being outsiders, their excellence was evident. Daniel was upright, prudent, and God-fearing, and this soon caught the attention of the kings, especially Darius, the Medo-Persian who assumed the throne after the fall of Babylon. Darius found in Daniel an excellent spirit, so much so that the king decided to place him above the satraps and governors, practically as his right-hand man. But that's when envy begins to grow. The other officials of the kingdom could not bear to see a foreigner, a servant of the God of Israel, occupying such a position. So they begin to look for a flaw, a loophole to overthrow Daniel. They search everything, his habits, his words, his attitudes, but they find nothing. Daniel was irreproachable. Then they realize the only way to get this guy is if it's because of his faith. And that's exactly what they did. They devised a Machiavellian plan and took him to the king under the guise of worship. "O King Darius, live forever. Establish a royal decree for 30 days. No one may pray to any god or man except you. Whoever disobeys will be thrown into the lion's den." Darius, flattered by the idea, signed the decree. It was a perfect trap. And Daniel, when he heard about the decree, he didn't hide. He didn't cower. He went straight to his house, opened the windows towards Jerusalem, and prayed, as he always did, 3 times a day. Prayer was his refuge, his fuel, his connection with heaven. Even knowing the risk, Daniel remained faithful. He didn't pray in secret. He prayed with faith, and that's exactly where his enemies caught him. They ran to the king and accused him. "Daniel, that Hebrew who is among us, disobeyed your decree. He is praying to his God." Darius, upon hearing this, was devastated. He didn't want to hurt Daniel. He spent the day trying to find a way to free him, but there was no turning back. The law of the Medes and Persians could not be revoked. At dusk, with no way out, the king ordered Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. But first, he said something to him that revealed his respect and faith. "May your God, whom you continually serve, deliver." Daniel was taken. A stone is rolled over the entrance to the pit, and the royal seal is placed. A silent night begins, silent to the world. But in heaven, an intervention was about to happen. Night falls over Babylon. The dark sky seems to reflect the mood within King Darius' heart. He, the most powerful man in the empire, was distressed. He had ordered an innocent man to be thrown into a pit full of hungry lions because of a stupid, thoughtless decree. And now, it was too late. Dario couldn't eat that night. He refused any kind of entertainment, and sleep abandoned him. All he could think was, can Daniel's God deliver him? A question that, in that silent dawn, echoed not only in his heart, but also in the sky. Meanwhile, in the humid darkness of the pit, a spectacle invisible to human eyes was taking place. Lions, wild animals used to devouring prey with ferocity, were there, quiet, calmly lying down, as if they were under the command of something greater than themselves, or rather, someone's. The Bible says that God sent an angel, and that angel closed the lions' mouths. Daniel was not hurt or touched. He spent the night there with the most feared animals in the kingdom, in complete peace. An inexplicable, undeniable, indisputable miracle. As soon as dawn dawned, Darius got up. He ran to the pit. Literally, a king running like a desperate boy. When he arrives, he shouts in a distressed voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, could your God, whom you serve continually, have delivered you from the lions?" And then, from the depths of the den, a firm voice echoes, like a thunder of faith, O king. "Live forever! My God sent his angel, who shut the lions' mouths. They have done me no harm, for I have been found innocent before him, and also before you, O king." Silence. For a second, the king seems unable to believe what he hears. But then joy bursts onto his face. He immediately orders Daniel to be taken out of the den. And when they take him out, everyone is astonished. Not a scratch was on his body. Nothing, as if he had never entered that terrible place. Then the king acts with justice. Those who had plotted against Daniel, the real culprits, are thrown into the same den. And this time, the lions show who they really are. The biblical text is clear before they even touch the ground. The bodies of the accusers are torn to pieces. But Darius doesn't stop there. The king writes a decree, now not out of pride, but out of reverence. "I make a decree that throughout my kingdom men will tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God who endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed, and his dominion will never end. He delivers, saves, works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, and delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And Daniel? Oh, Daniel prospers. He continues his life with even greater honor, more influence, and above all, with unshakable faith. He has proven to the entire empire that there is no human decree that can silence the faithfulness of a true servant. This story is not just about lions. It is about faith that does not negotiate. It is about praying even when they say it is forbidden. It is about trusting even when all seems lost. Because the God who delivered Daniel is still the same. After everything that happened, many people looked to Daniel as a hero. But what few knew was that the real secret was not in the moment he was saved, but in everything that came before. Daniel was a man of principles. From a young age, he stood out for his wisdom and faith. When he was taken captive from his homeland, Israel, to Babylon, he was still a teenager. But even though he was forced to live in a completely different culture, with pagan values and idolatry everywhere, he did not become corrupt. In the palace, Daniel had access to banquets, wealth, and power. But he chose not to defile himself. He did not eat what everyone else ate. He did not do what everyone else did. He was different, and it was this difference that caught the attention of heaven. Time passed, kingdoms changed, kings were replaced. But Daniel was still there, serving with excellence, always with integrity, and above all, praying. 3 times a day, he knelt before the open window facing Jerusalem, even when it put his life at risk. Can you imagine this man's routine? He didn't pray in secret, afraid of being seen. He prayed as he always had. Even after the death decree, he didn't change a thing, because his communion with God was not negotiable. Not with threats, not with promises of wealth, not with the fear of lions. And that's exactly what the miracle of the pit teaches us, a great lesson. It began before the pit. It began when Daniel decided to keep his faith alive every day, when he chose to obey God, even if it cost everything. This constancy is what prepared Daniel for the impossible. He didn't have to improvise a last-minute faith. He already lived a real, authentic, solid faith. That's why, When the moment of testing arrived, he was ready. And there's more. The impact of his faithfulness went far beyond himself. Because of his stance, the name of God was glorified throughout Babylon. Darius' decree, exalting the Lord, spread across nations, empires, and kingdoms. Daniel's testimony became an eternal echo of faith, which crossed generations and reached us. Just imagine a young Hebrew taken captive, alone in a foreign land, becoming an instrument for kings to recognize the true God. Isn't that extraordinary? And perhaps you who are reading or listening to this story today are feeling exactly as Daniel felt one day in a hostile environment, surrounded by pressures, tempted to give up your faith to fit in. But listen to this, the faithfulness of just one can change everything. Heaven does not ignore a constant prayer. Heaven answers those who remain standing when everyone else kneels to the system. Daniel was not strong by himself. He was strong because he had communion with Almighty God. And this strength, this faith, is also available to you. As Daniel shone, the envious eyes within the palace began to boil. The other satraps and governors noticed that, day after day, Daniel gained more and more trust from King Darius. And this was unbearable for them. How could a foreigner, a Hebrew exile, be about to be placed above everyone else? This was what was said in the corridors of power. They knew if they wanted to get him out of the way, they would have to find some fault, and they began to spy on him. They investigated his reports. They searched his administration. They looked for loopholes, scandals, corruption, any slip-up. But they found nothing. Daniel was incorruptible, so they came to the following conclusion. The only way to catch him is if it's related to his faith. Yes, Daniel was so righteous that the only visible weakness was his devotion to God. And that's when the trap emerged, a subtle but deadly plan. They met in secret and went to the king with a poisoned proposal. "O King Darius, live forever. We propose that for 30 days, anyone who prays to any god or man, except you, O king, be thrown into the lion's den." The king, flattered by the idea of being the center of attention and by the unity of his officials, signed the decree. And according to the law of the Medes and Persians, once signed, not even the king could revoke it. They knew exactly what they were doing. The decree was not to promote the king. It was a trap exclusively against Daniel. And Daniel knew this. He heard about the decree. He understood the danger. But what did he do? Nothing changed. He went up to his room, as he always did, opened the windows toward Jerusalem, knelt down, and prayed 3 times a day. Not once, not in secret, not out of fear. He did not let the decree change his communion with God, because he did not pray out of obligation. He prayed because it was his essence, his life, and of course his enemies were lurking. As soon as they saw Daniel praying, they ran to the king to accuse him. They were not interested in religion. They were thirsty for power, for revenge. And now, they had a powerful letter in their hands, the king's own signature. They confronted Darius. "O king, did you not sign a decree that forbade prayers to anyone other than yourself?" "Yes," the king answers, "and the law must be fulfilled. For you know that Daniel, that exile among the children of Judah, did not obey you." The king's heart breaks at once. He realizes that he has been deceived, that the decree which seemed to praise his name was, in fact, a dirty trick against his best man. And Darius tries everything. He spends the day looking for a legal way to free Daniel, but he finds no way out. At dusk, the king is forced to comply with the law. With a heavy heart, he gives the order, "Take Daniel to the lion's den." Before leaving him, The king approaches Daniel and says with a choked voice, "May the God you serve continually deliver you." And Daniel is taken, handcuffed, silent, without screaming, without despair. With the same faith that sustained him until then, he walks towards the most extreme test of his life. The sun was beginning to set when the soldiers opened the heavy entrance to the cave. The smell of hungry beasts escaped from the darkness. The roars echoed in the silence, cutting the soul of those nearby. Daniel was led to the edge. He did not beg. He did not protest. There was no despair, only faith. King Darius was there, and his face was one of pure torment. It seemed as if he were sending his own son to his death. But it was too late to turn back. The cave was deep, dark, the floor covered in bones. The lions moved restlessly, feeling the smell of human flesh approaching. They knew what that meant, another victim. But Daniel went down, perhaps in silence, perhaps in prayer. The Bible doesn't tell us in detail what he said, but we know he wasn't alone. The stone was rolled over the entrance to the den, and the king sealed it with his ring and the rings of the nobles. It was like signing the sentence in royal blood. No one could get Daniel out of there without a miracle. And then silence. The king returned to the palace, but he couldn't sleep. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want to listen to music. He didn't want anyone around. Darius, who had power over the entire empire, was now just a repentant man with his hands tied. The night was long. Imagine the king pacing back and forth, looking up at the sky, murmuring prayers that he himself didn't know how to say, hoping that Daniel's God was real. Because that night, only God could change the end of this story. Inside the den, no one knew what was happening. But there was something supernatural there. The lions calmed down, as if an invisible presence had invaded the environment. A presence that stopped the beast's killer instinct. An angel, a miracle, a deliverance that no one could have imagined. The dawn passed slowly. The palace was silent, the guards were motionless, and the king was restless, his heart pounding. No news from the cave, no certainty, only hope. Inside the cave, the impossible. Daniel, still alive, still whole. No bites, no scratches. Around him, the lions lay down like tame cats, quiet, perhaps even sleepy. The lions' mouths were closed. Literally. An angel of the Lord was there, sent directly by the Most High God to protect his faithful servant. Daniel, in peace, spent the night as few human beings would, inside the cave, with wild beasts, and protected by the sky. Meanwhile, King Darius could no longer wait. As soon as the first rays of sun appeared on the horizon, he ran. Yes, the king ran. He forgot about the crown, the throne, the royal pose. He ran like a desperate father runs to meet a lost son. Arriving at the cave, he cried out in a choked voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Silence, and then a firm voice echoed from within. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. They did me no harm, for I was found innocent before him and also before you, O king. The impossible happened. The improbable was witnessed. Daniel was alive." Imagine the relief, the astonishment, the emotion of seeing that man come out of the pit without a scratch. The soldiers helped to remove the stone. Daniel walked away, head held high, eyes full of peace. The king, unable to contain his emotion, perhaps hugged Daniel, perhaps he cried. It was more than a deliverance. It was a sign. Daniel's God was real and powerful. Darius was not a weak king. He was bound by the rules of his own signature. But now, after seeing the miracle before his eyes, he takes a radical attitude. The king looks at Daniel, still astonished, still amazed by the deliverance, but his countenance soon changes. Now, he is angry, not with Daniel, but with the men who deceived him. Those governors and satraps who set up that whole trap did not know who they were dealing with, and now they would have to face the price of their wickedness. King Darius orders that all of them be thrown into the lion's den. They, their families, everything that represented that conspiracy against a righteous man. But this time, there was no angel. There was no deliverance. The Bible says that they were torn to pieces before they even touched the ground of the pit. The same place where Daniel spent the night in peace was the place of destruction of his enemies. This is not just revenge. This is justice. A justice that shows that evil may even try, may even seem to have won for a moment, but never triumphs before the true God. Darius then does something even more incredible. Taken by reverence and fear, he writes a new decree now, not to worship himself or his gods, but to recognize the God of Daniel. Peace and prosperity to all peoples, nations and languages of the earth. Make everyone fear and reverence the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He delivers, saves, performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. A decree of worship, bishop, a public testimony. The king of the greatest nation of that time, declaring the glory of God because of the faithfulness of one man. And Daniel, he remained firm, even more respected, even more honored. It continued to prosper under the reign of Darius, and also under that of Cyrus the Persian. Daniel's story does not end when he leaves the den. Quite the contrary. It is there that it begins to spread like fire in dry stubble. The miracle of the lion's den was not just an individual deliverance. It was a divine cry, audible to all nations. He who trusts in the Lord will not be put to shame. After Darius' decree, people began to ask, who is this God who shuts the lions' mouths? Who is this servant who prefers to die rather than disobey his God? Daniel became a living legend, a symbol of true faith in the midst of an empire full of false gods and political interests. He was not a warrior. He was not a king. He was an ordinary, faithful man who prayed 3 times a day with the window open, even knowing the risk. And it was precisely this courageous simplicity that touched hearts throughout Babylon and far beyond. Over the centuries, Daniel's name began to be cited by prophets, teachers, and even by Jesus Christ, who recognized Daniel as an example of justice and steadfastness in faith. Children heard his story in the synagogues. Kings remembered his testimony. And even today, in the 21st century, millions of people around the world are moved by the memory of a man who preferred to be thrown to the lions rather than deny his God. Daniel taught something that no position, no office, no earthly glory can overcome. Obeying God is always the best path, even when all seems lost, even when the decree seems immutable, even when the lions are already roaring. The God who saved Daniel is still the same, and he still honors those who do not bow down, do not sell out, and do not hide. The story of Daniel is much more than an isolated miracle. It is a prophetic sign, a shadow of what would happen to Christ himself, and to all who choose to live in authentic faith in a world that tries to silence the truth. Just as Daniel was unjustly accused, Jesus was also betrayed, falsely accused and condemned. Just as Daniel was thrown into a pit and left to die, Jesus was placed in a tomb after being crucified. But here comes the most powerful parallel. Just as Daniel came out alive from the grave, triumphant, Jesus rose from the tomb, conquering death forever. Daniel is a type of Christ, a silent announcement of the eternal plan of salvation, showing that faithfulness to the Father always ends in glory, even when the path passes through the valley of the shadow of death. And do you know what this means for you and me? That Torede's grave is not the end. That God's silence during the dark night does not mean abandonment. That the lions that surround you are not greater than the God that lives within you. Daniel's story is an invitation: be faithful, even if it hurts, even if everything conspires against you, even if no one understands. Because, in the end, heaven rises to honor those who do not negotiate their fate. Daniel did not seek recognition. He sought communion. And that is precisely why he was exalted. God is not looking for the strongest or the most talented. He is looking for the faithful, those who continue to pray, who continue to believe, even when the decree has already been signed, even when the grave is already open, even when the roars seem louder than hope. The story of Daniel in the lion's den is not stuck in the past. It echoes to this day, in the lives of ordinary people who refuse to bow their knees to the system. Daniel did not survive by luck. He survived because he chose faithfulness over convenience, and that faithfulness has become a beacon, a legacy that spans the centuries and inspires all those who face their own lions. Lions of fear, lions of rejection, lions of scarcity, lions of persecution. Daniel shows us that true power is not in avoiding the den, but in trusting that God enters it with you, and that He is faithful to get you out of there without even a scratch. The den was the stage, but heaven was the author of the scene. The modern world still creates its dens. Today's culture still tries to silence you. The system still does everything it can to make you stop praying, stop believing, stop being faithful. But Daniel reminds us that those who remain firm conquer kingdoms. Whoever does not sell himself is exalted by God. Whoever prays, even under the decree of death, activates the supernatural.